We're almost there. On this edition of the Paddock Pass podcast, we're going to be talking about the second and final pre-season test of the MotoGP season 2025 that took place at the Buriram International Circuit and the countdown to the first Grand Prix happening at the same venue. I'm Adam Wheeler and I'm joined by my venerable colleagues, Mr. Neil Morrison and Mr. David Emmett. But Dave, you're kind of, we're disturbing you slightly, aren't we?
You're always, like I'm disturbed as it is, so it's hard for me to be even more disturbed. But yes, I am on a brief pre-season break.
A sojourn.
Yes, that's right. Before we start, yes, I told my wife we could go anywhere she liked for a week to get some sun because she desperately needed some sun, and she chose. Anywhere. It didn't have to be anywhere near a circuit. And she chose Portimao. So I'm here in Portimao. But it is absolutely lovely here. And, there's lots of lovely walks and good times.
She's been institutionalized, Dave. You've done it. You've ruined the poor woman.
That's right. She doesn't believe that anywhere outside of the radius of about 50 kilometers of a circuit actually exists. It's all entirely fictional.
Neil, you've got one more free weekend before it all begins. Feeling a little bit sentimental?
Wistful, perhaps, for the vacation that has gone. No, I'm pretty excited, Ad. We're recording this on the Monday, and I'm heading to Jerez tomorrow because there's a Moto2 and Moto3 test there. So it'll be good to go and see what's going on. There was a test last week in Portimao where rain affected play somewhat, but also I think we got to see one or two interesting things with regards to the time. So yeah, looking forward to going back to a circuit for the first time this year, as I missed the two MotoGP tests, and then I believe we're flying off to Buriram together in a rather romantic fashion.
Well, speaking of romance, I was full of bliss on Friday because it was Valentine's Day, but I was with my eldest son and we were in West London watching Queen's Park Rangers thrash Derby County 4-0, and it was
on Valentine's Day.
On Valentine's Day. Well, actually, we're celebrating our 20th wedding anniversary this week. So
nice.
was, kind of just rolled the emotion into a future appointment. So, but football.
I think they also won, if I remember correctly.
4-0?
Yeah, goodness me.
It was a different kind of ecstasy, Dave.
Exactly. It makes a change. Yeah, exactly. It makes a change from me watching you sitting there with your head in your hands suffering. So I was happy for you, even though I disdain football. I was very happy that you got to experience that brief flash of joy.
Well, listen, before we kick off this podcast, a reminder, we're backed by Rental Street this year, guys. So if you have a street bike or a road bike and you're in need of some accessories, then head to rental.com, click on the street section, and you'll be able to check out some fantastic gear you can pick up for your motorcycle, whether it's clip-ons, bars, grips, different accessories. Have a look at rental.com. And thanks to those guys for coming on board and supporting us. We've also got some support from Pole Position Travel. And we had this message in from them last week, and I'm just going to read it now. MotoGP fans, this is your chance. We have limited rooms left for the opening round of the season in Thailand. Our deluxe package is based right next to the circuit in the new Modena by Fraser Buriram. And our classic package is a stage just 15 minutes from the track. Each package includes circuit transfers on Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. Thursday, there's a welcome drink. Friday, there's an opening dinner with guest speakers, a welcome pack with merchandise, and a pole position travel guide, including a Thai speaker. If you use the code THAI25Q, you can get 10% off on any of these packages. Again, that's THAI25Q. Enter that in the Pole Position Travel website, polepositiontravel.com, and you'll be able to join us, Neil and I, and everybody else in the first Grand Prix of the year in Buriram. So have a look. Again, a reminder, the website is polepositiontravel.com. If you're a Patreon, if you're joining us on the Paddock Pass Podcast Patreon channel, then we also have our own code, which is P, the letter P, POD, 25X. If you enter that into any travel, any trip for any Grand Prix or event associated with MotoGP or World Superbike this year, then you'll also get a small discount. So big thanks to Pole Position Travel for backing the podcast this year. Right, let's start straight away with some wrap and some thoughts and some opinions, a little bit of bench racing from the Buriram test. One question I have for you two, just to kick things off: should there have been more testing for this season? It seems like everyone was rushing to get everything done, and we're in a homologation period that's going to last 2 years. Thoughts, Dave?
Lol, no.
Why? You love testing.
Yeah, I do love to. I know I'm sort of arguing against myself. Like I would like to have sort of basically 20 rounds of testing, but that's not how it works. The good thing about having less testing is that people are less prepared, and being less prepared, the more testing you have, the bigger the advantage is for the factory who can spend the most, who can do the most work, and so you end up with bigger gaps. What you need, or what you want to have an entertaining series, is to have enough testing for teams and riders to prepare, but not so much that they have that someone can actually gain an advantage. You want them to have to work throughout the year so that people can make up gaps. So yeah, and no matter how much testing you do, I mean, if you go back to the times, like 20 years ago, I think Alex Briggs was once explaining that basically, they'd almost be in the Sama in Sepang at the airport there for sort of about a month or 2 months of the year, because they were they were testing every week. It was all private testing. There was no limits on it at all. They'd just go and test and test and test and test, and that gave the factory teams, and especially the factories who were willing to spend the money, an enormous advantage. So the short answer to your question is no. There was precisely enough testing. They had 2 tests, 2 different tracks. They got enough time to test the stuff that they've developed, refine it, make the choices, and now they have to live with them. And I like that.
Yeah, but Neil, when we're in such a staggered series as it's been MotoGP for the last couple of years, and everything's weighted towards Bologna and Ducati, then maybe there is. I know we have concessions, but it just seems that 2 tests and 5 days is not quite enough to get things ready for the season, never mind 2.
That's true, but we do have 22 races this year, Ad. So, try tell in some of the mechanics and technicians that they have to go away for another week or 2 weeks to some tropical climb during the winter months. And even the companies, the manufacturers that are trying to play catch up were dialing in their race settings by the final day of this Burram test. So I think Dave's on the money that we've had enough. It's time to go racing.
Yeah, the reason that Ducati have dominated has got nothing to do with the amount of testing they've done. It's got to do with the amount of bikes they have on the grid. Basically they've had 8 bikes on the grid for so long. They've had so much data. And they understood a couple of things. So, again, I've said this before. I don't think Ducati are going to dominate the way that they did in 2024, just because the other factories have had a chance to catch up on the Michelin rear tire. But also, they've lost a little bit of that advantage in the number of bikes they've had, the number of the amount of data they have. Just they've dominated because of the way that they were working rather than the amount of testing that was done.
Well, that's why I think there needs to be more testing, or maybe just more testing without Ducati. But that actually leads us on to our first kind of question, Dave. I mean, have Ducati actually dropped the ball with their 2025 ideas because they weren't able to finalize quite as much as they would like, at least publicly, for all we know, what went on inside the Ducati Lenovo pit box? It seems that, Marc Marquez and Pecco Bagnaia are going to be slotting quite a few of last year's components or ideas or solutions onto their new race bikes.
Well, yes. Have they dropped the ball? Absolutely not. The point about development is that you try things and experiment and try to find ways to improve things. But the beauty of motorcycle racing is that everything is a compromise. And so wherever you make progress, it costs you somewhere else. You lose out somewhere else. And they were trying to improve the acceleration phase, but that cost them in the engine braking phase. and that was not a compromise. That they were losing too much in braking, and it wasn't actually compensating. So I don't think they lost anything. I think they tried some things, but they're also they will have a lot of new parts. They will have they've got a new swing arm, they've got a new gearbox. They worked a lot on electronics, and I think this is the other thing. A lot of the stuff that we don't see is just electronics. They will spend so much time working on electronics, and it's not something you can sort of see. There isn't. Perhaps they should put special little lights on the bikes or something, so that we know they've changed the electronics. But little LED panel with all the cool flashing lights. I'm actually, the more I think about it, the more I'm liking this. But yeah, I mean, all that stuff is completely invisible. So it's really hard. It's really hard to see. And again, like changes to the gearbox. How are you ever going to tell unless you break into the garage, Ducati garage in the middle of the night and sort of crack it open and compare it against the previous CAD drawings, which you stole from Ducati earlier. So, yeah, it's really, really difficult to tell.
Help us, Neil. He's going off on some weird conspiracy tangent.
Exactly. Yeah, the MotoGP.
I'm just trying to make it more entertaining. Just look at the blinking lights. Look at the pretty. Oh, pretty.
Yeah, the man that hates Christmas, campaigning for Christmas tree lights to be added onto MotoGP's finest prototypes. It's quite an interesting divergence for you, Dave, I have to say. But I don't think Ducati have dropped the ball at all, really. I think if they were persistent with this 25 engine against the strong advice of their two factory riders, then you could say that they were maybe trying to overcomplicate things. But what we've gleaned from the comments of both Bagnaia and Marquez so far is that they have been listened to, and Ducati understand the situation they're in, which is they're in a brilliant position of strength, and they were going to have to work extremely hard to try and make the 24 package better than it already was, persistent with this 25 engine was maybe going to be too much of a risk. Had there not been an engine freeze at the end of 2025, maybe they would have persisted with it. But I think Bagnaia was saying at the end of testing that, with 2 years of the engine frozen, it's just way too much of a risk to take. So I think Ducati has learned some of its lessons from the past. You think back to the start of 2022 when they probably did too much to what was an already impressive package. I think Marc Marquez said that it's better to be conservative in positions of strength, and it seems as though that is what they're doing. And as Dave said, it's not like they're just going to be racing the 24 package. There's new things coming, new swing arm. I think they also said that the Linea also said there's going to be a new ride height device, which they'll continue testing in Buriram at round one. So they're not standing still, and you just have to look at the time sheets to see that. Marquez fastest, Alex Marquez second, and I'm sure we're going to talk about this a bit more, but some pretty ferocious rhythm and pace, which I think will have sent fear into the majority of the MotoGP field.
Yeah, plus we've got 3 more tests during the season. They can change the chassis at any time. They've got one more aero update. They'll probably start the season on the GP24 aero, but they've got another update in the middle of the season, and then they've got 2 more updates. They had to focus on the engine. They've sorted the engine. They've decided the engine, and that meant concentrating on other parts of the bike.
In his last media debrief in Thailand, Pekka Bagnaia said he's been a bit of a fibber. He's been sort of misleading us. So who knows what's going on?
Surely not. I can't. I'm shocked to hear that riders might dissemble and lie to us about what they've been doing.
Long lap penalty. Gives him a long lap.
Several. But wasn't there a time, David and Neil, where maybe more for the Japanese manufacturers, but there was a time when having to accept the previous year's model to go racing with for the new season was seen as a bit of, losing face, by acknowledging that your ideas and your technology solutions aren't quite up to scratch. I mean, we can all kind of acknowledge that the GP24 is one of the finest motorcycles we've seen in MotoGP history, certainly in the modern era. Therefore, it's not going to be easy to better it. But, you have... Okay, Marc Marquez was racing a GP23 last year, so he's made 2 steps of upgrades. But, this is not... I don't know, we've not seen Ducati sort of reinsert themselves again as the technological masters of MotoGP, are we?
Well, I don't think it's, as I said previously, it's not like they're going to just be racing the GP24. I think Bagnaia said at the close of testing that what they'll be racing will be the GP24.9.
0.9, yeah.
It's quite close to the 25 bike. Probably just the engine is the exception. So yeah, there's still going to be quite a few new things on there. And yeah, I think living in a world of pragmatic thinking is an essential part of racing. And while Ducati may have got carried away by some of their own technological advances in the past and maybe been slightly arrogant in that sense, that is one criticism I think you could have leveled with them in previous years. But I think, pragmatism seems to reign, and that has to be applauded.
What a sensible answer.
The other thing is, I mean, look, first of all, losing face is all well and good, but winning races makes you soon forget about losing face. And the other thing is, we only have the word of these Japanese factories that they weren't using that they were using new engines. They could have been doing anything, and we probably wouldn't have known.
All right. Well, listen, moving on to the next question, and bearing in mind we are talking about Buriram mainly, maybe some dregs also of Sepang, pre-season pretty much. Is anybody ready to call Marc Marquez as a 2025 champion yet?
Yes.
Almost, yes.
Really? 22 races, 44 race starts.
Yeah. He was just so much better than everyone else. I mean, he was... obviously, the thing about Pecco Bagnaia is he always struggles at first and takes a bit of time to get up to speed. But I mean, this is Marc has chosen this year to be champion. That was why he went to Gresini. He wanted to, rediscover the joy of riding, understand how to ride a different bike. That all that is sorted. That there is only one checkbox. He said he had a list of sort of check boxes that he wanted to check off, and it was like be competitive for the top 5, get on the podium, win a race, and the next one is obviously win a championship. So that's what he's going to try and do this year. And I don't see anyone. I think Pecco Bagnaia is going to make it really, really hard for him. But I don't think if it's straight Pecco versus Marc wins 95 times out of 100.
I wouldn't go as far as that, Dave, but I do agree he is looking in a ridiculously strong position. Fastest on both days in this test. I think the first day was his first time as an official day test topper since July 2020, which maybe isn't the best omen for Marc, because just a few days after that, he went and spectacularly broke his humerus in his right arm, and this whole web of complication began. But yeah, not just ridiculously fast in time attack mode, but that race simulation he did on the final day was really quite something. I know it's important not to read too much into these kind of things in testing, but his lap average was, I think, a 30.3, which is pretty much competitive sprint pace.
Exactly. To me, that's the point. He is him over full race distance is as fast as everyone else over in a sprint race.
Yeah, but without passing anyone and without dealing with tire pressures.
But when you're on pole position, you don't have to pass anyone.
Well, yeah, if you're on pole and lead the entire race, then it's not going to be that much of an issue.
Yeah, and just for context, that was, I think, 0.6 per lap faster than the next best race simulation, which was Pedro Acosta. There is a couple of caveats to throw in, or there are a few caveats to throw in. One of them being that Alex Marquez was upset by some front tire pressure issue and electronics issue during his race simulation, which meant that he was a lot slower. Plus, Bagnaia had a nightmare first day in Thailand where nothing seemed to work. So he was playing catch up a little bit in the final day and didn't get to put together a long run, but also said he felt very confident with used tires. So you have to imagine if Bagnaia had been in the position to do a race simulation, he would have been in the mix as well. But yeah, certainly in terms of I think those three are probably the ones you're looking at maybe for the podium in the first race, just on the basis of testing so far. And then we haven't really seen, or we haven't got a chance to see what the likes of Aprilia or Honda or even Yamaha can do over full race distance. So but certainly early indications are that Marc's very well placed.
Yeah, the other thing about Acosta's, in fact, both Acosta and Binder's race sim, is that their rear tyre was completely shot by the end of it. This is a problem that KTM have had. I mean, it's always a problem at Buriram. Is the centre of the tyre gets used a lot because the rear just wants to spin up. You're doing a lot of very hard acceleration, and you've got this special heat, this special sort of heat resistant tyre, which has a bit less grip and tends to spin more. There were problems all last year. Now there's problems. There were big problems for KTM. KTM suffered more because I think Jack was saying last year the same. And Acosta's pace dropped from sort of mid 30s to high 31s in his race in the second half. After about 14 laps, the pace just really dropped off. So I think Acosta is faster than he looks, just based on his times. But KTM have this problem specifically at Buriram, and we don't know what it's going to be like at other tracks.
Just very briefly on Mark, while we're talking about him, I spoke to Jack Appleyard, who was fronting after the flag show. He was speaking to Davide Tardozzi with quite a lot of frequency over the couple of days, and I think after Mark's race simulation, Tardozzi heavily indicated that he was nowhere near pushing at 100%, which also gives you an idea that there is still more to come. So yeah, that is another thing that might worry some of the other rivals that might think they have a chance to fight for the title this year.
Just quickly on KTM, the message from them at the end of the test was they still need to deduce their possibilities over a full race distance, like you were hinting there, Dave, not just for tyre life, but I think full kind of competitiveness. That's something I guess they'll be running on sims and through the data these weeks and these days before the first Grand Prix, but it's going to be a complete lottery, I think, for them, whether they start, say, the full length Grand Prix in a decent way and a decent speed, but then by the end they're knackered, or the other way around, it remains to be seen. But yeah, there's still quite a few questions that emerge from the Buriram test that, have to be answered at that race and at similar events when it comes to that sort of tropical climate. Mm-hmm. Just about Mark, I think he is the greatest motorcycle racer I've ever seen, but I think we just have to be realistic. Over 44 race starts this season, he's going to be on the ground at some point, and perhaps he only has himself to beat, because it's maybe a little bit of a shame that Alex Marquez is a double world champion in 2 categories, but maybe we needed a real star talent on a GP24 in a satellite team to be able to give those two a push.
How many DNFs did Mark have last year, which were due to him crashing out? And was that number higher or lower than Pekka Bagnaya's, for example?
Are we getting all Bruce Forsyth on me, Dave?
Yes, yeah.
Card,
well,
right.
Yeah, exactly.
I'm going to say
it was for a second career.
Just wait for you to say 180.
It didn't crash that many times.
Yeah, it's a different game show, isn't it?
Yeah.
But okay, it was less than Bagnaia, wasn't it, from points scoring positions? But I mean, how many times has he been to hospital, Dave, since 2020?
Yeah, but he's not on a Honda anymore, is he?
Yeah, good point. Well, we'll see. But I think the nature of racing means we can't quite say that Marquez is world champion yet. At least I don't want to. Is that acceptable?
No, that's entirely. I don't want to say it either. And yet, I think if I had to wager my own money, then I would not be wagering it on anyone else.
Just a quick tease, actually. We will be running the Paddock Pass podcast Alpine Stars Fantasy League again this year. I think it's going to crank into action next week. Next show, we'll have some talk about it. But I think if anyone wants to put Marc Marquez in their team, then they're going to be using a sizable amount of their budget. It's going to be pretty tricky to select him based on Buriram alone. So I think the fact that we're talking about him so much from that second test is quite worthwhile. But let's move on to something else. Dave, this one's maybe a bit more specific for you because you've had some great photographic galleries and analysis on motomatters.com over the last couple of weeks. But why did we not really see any more new stuff in Buriram?
I think that's a really good question. First of all, like I said, especially about the electronics, we know that Aprilia worked an awful lot on, like a huge amount of electronics, and I suspect that some of the big step that they've made has been due to electronics. You don't see electronics. Ducati have been working on electronics. Yamaha, Honda needs to work on electronics. A lot of the stuff that they've been working on has just not been visible. We're used to seeing the aero. I think because I remember going to tests sort of in the pre-aero era, and you would have to look very, very carefully. This was something that Neil Spaulding used to do, would take a photo of a bike and then pretty much every morning take a picture of every single bike at every race he was at, and then just overlay them and look to see what had changed. And it would be absolutely tiny and minor details. I'm okay at spotting differences between frames. I'm not very good at swing arms for some reason or other, but anyway, I'm okay at spotting the difference between frames. But it's really difficult. I mean, you really do have to look at very, very specific things. And so the really big difference that we're used to seeing is the aero. And now all of the aero designs are converging more or less on the same sort of basic shape, which is what happens when a technology matures. Everything sort of converges on a single design, which is the most efficient or the most flexible or whatever. And so, and it's more and more refinements. I mean, apparently, I probably saw the new the new Ducati Aero while I was in Sepang, but I will hold my hand up and say I didn't recognize it, because the side pods are very slightly different, and the I think the upper wings are more or less the same, but they're very, very marginally different. There are no big differences anymore. So there's been lots of stuff tested, but the stuff that we're testing, we're not seeing, because it's much, much more subtle. Some of the big stuff we saw is, the big pod on the back of the KTM, the big pod on the back of the Honda. The one on the back of the Honda has pretty much disappeared again. It's only on Chantra's bike, because Chantra is getting he's getting hand-me-downs until he can step up his pace and become competitive. The KTM one, it looks like they're sort of like going backwards and forwards. They don't know whether it's probably a mass damper. We don't know, but it probably is. We know that the bikes are putting more and more weight on the back of the bike. Yamaha, for example, have their ride height device in the tail, because it's a big chunk of aluminium and hydraulic fluid and God knows what else. Probably weighs 2-3 kilos. And having it over the rear gives you, it balances the bike out. It gives you a bit more weight over the rear. It's an extreme position to put a lot of weight. So, that was interesting. But yeah, you're not seeing really big radical changes, because people are pretty much done with this format. They know how this format works, and it's all now just in the details.
Can you spot these things standing up, Dave, or do you have to be down on all fours?
No, you do have to. I mean, you do have to practice your squats. You have to get your glutes and your thigh and your quads going to be able to really spot this stuff.
And also, we've never had any doubt about your swinging ability, Dave. So rest assured. Neil, is some of the maybe less cosmetic changes to do with some of the pragmatism you're talking about? I mean, we are coming to the end of the development cycle.
Yeah, quite possibly. Yeah, and also just I think with the likes of Yamaha, for example, it seems that they were doing quite a bit of testing towards the end of last year, and it seems as though Quartararo and Rins were able to decide upon the proper direction for 2025 at the Barcelona test. I think both riders confirmed that the engine that they used in that test was the right way to go, and therefore, by the time they'd already got to Sepang, it was okay. We don't have to sort of think about that anymore. We can focus on other things, namely things like electronics, like Dave mentioned. So yeah, I think there is a kind of an understanding now of where each factory should be. Yet you listen to KTM speaking, and by the sounds of things, there was still a whole lot of things being tested at their end over the couple of days in Buriram. So as Dave said, it's maybe not clear to observers standing by. Also, there was just a lot less journalists on the ground in Buriram, and therefore certain things might not be picked up as they would somewhere like Sepang, where I don't know, 10, 15 people are peering into the garages, during the afternoon. So I think that's maybe a factor too.
Sepang was horrific for Aprilia. I mean, it was, I don't know, I think Massimo Ribola must have been having a few extra whiskies at the bar, I think, after the first day. But Buriram was slightly cheerier. I mean, Ralph Fernandez had surgery and was able to get straight back on the Trackhouse RSGP. And then, of course, Marco Bezzecchi just looked like he got really into the groove with the kind of idiosyncrasies of this particular Italian motorcycle. So the big question is, do we see Marco winning a race this year based on what he was able to show in Thailand? I think it's looking pretty good.
My contrarian view is that actually what happened at Sepang was really good for Aprilia, because it put an awful lot of responsibility onto the shoulders of Marco Bezzecchi, and Bezzecchi really, really stepped up. Like, he was just really impressive. He got through all of his work. Savadori obviously sort of like stepped in to do a lot of the bulk. But Bezzecchi really stepped up. He took on that responsibility. It gave him a huge amount of self-confidence, which I think was one of the things that he was missing. And he's just really quick. He was really confident. He was really calm. You could tell also in his body language even by the end of the Sepang test, he was more confident. He was, stronger. He was more sort of, he was standing up straighter. He grew a couple of centimeters. It was very impressive. So, it was a huge loss losing Martin. But I think Martin, you don't have to worry about Martin's confidence. Martin, he's a world champion. He believes in himself. He's going to be fine once he gets back up. He's going to regret having missed those first few weeks of test, that bit of testing. It's going to take him 3 or 4 rounds to actually get his head around this 2025 Aprilia. But I think the step forward which Marco Bezzecchi made was so big that it more than compensates the loss of the loss of Martin. So I'm quite optimistic for Aprilia in general. And also the bike just looked really good. You saw how fast Ayogura was. So I'm quite optimistic about Aprilia in general, and especially about Bezzecchi. I think this has been really, really good for Bezzecchi.
I'm not going to say that this wasn't good for Bezzecchi, but this overcompensates for the lack of Martin. I think that's maybe going slightly far, Dave. I mean, would Aprilia have accepted this situation at the start of pre-season, that their prized fighter, the guy that they've broken the bank to prize away from Ducati, would miss all of pre-season? And, let's face it, we'll have a pretty steady start to the year as he gradually comes up to speed on the RSGP and still is far from being physically fit. I'm not exactly sure that Massimo Rivola would have shook your hand on that and said, yes, we have a deal, matey boy.
No, but I mean, they came out of it looking a lot better than you would expect. Like we all thought when after Martin sort of, managed to break himself, that was it. That was the end of Aprilia's hopes. But I think that is completely wrong. I think they've come out of it looking a lot better than we expected.
What, so you're saying we jumped the gun and we got in way ahead of ourselves?
Oh, surely not. Journalists drawing premature conclusions on only partial data. It's unheard of.
It is, yeah. That being said, I was very pleasantly surprised. I mean, Bezzecchi probably was, I think, along with Joan Mir, the biggest surprise of the test in some respects, because this has been a terrible track for Aprilia in years gone by. They've had terrible times in Buriram. I think they had a decent wet race last year, but had it not been for the rain, probably would have been an absolute nightmare for Aleix and Maverick. Bezzecchi does like this track. This is the place where he scored the first pole position of his MotoGP career, so there is that. But considering we have heard so much about the Aprilia being really weak in heavy braking areas, Buriram does have lots and lots of those. It was a pleasant surprise, and Bezzecchi finishing third was great, and that's despite him saying that he still feels some way off it in time attack mode. There was also the very encouraging sign of his sprint simulation on the final day, which of the riders that did sprint simulations was the fastest by quite some distance. I think he was maybe around 0.3 of a second on average per lap faster than the next best, which was Joan Mir. So, really great test for Bezzecchi. As Dave said, he seemed to grow in stature by 1 or 2 centimeters and really reveled in the added responsibility. He said that he was pretty nervous after what happened to Jorge in Sepang. He said the team were as well. They were really down. But the added trust that they gave him, definitely looked as though it worked out. And still a lot of question marks, I think, for Aprilia going into this year. The fact that they will have not really had Martin's input for most of this, well, in fact, all of testing this year, and that's a big concern. But yeah, there is a sign that the bike has taken a considerable step forward.
I mean, Bezzecchi was the rising star of MotoGP in 2023, wasn't he? And he was kind of usurped a little bit by Pedro Acosta last year, but then last year was terrible for him. I mean, he couldn't manage race situations. He couldn't get his head around trying to set up the GP23 at all. And it was just one big struggle. And I think his reputation or his potential took a bit of a hit. So he was in a pretty decent situation with Aprilia coming in, with them signing Jorge Martin, him being a little bit kind of like, I don't want to say a B-list rider, but he definitely didn't have as much of the spotlight as the Spaniard.
100%.
And now I think, this has been a pretty positive start to what is a little bit of a reinvention for him. If he had been 12th, 11th, 10th in the timesheets and not really showing any spark, then you could kind of keep tempering expectations. But now I think we can go back to almost that 2023 hype, if you like, or hyperbole, and think, okay, this could be the rival of his kind of talent again.
It's just one test, Ad. It's just one test.
Oh, come on now. I have to pad out the podcast somehow. Blimey.
2 tests. No, thank you, Ad. I completely agree. You're completely right.
Blimey, we're in agreement already. Feels like a new year and a new season. Well, listen, last kind of theme before we sort of bounce onto some rapid fire judgments. Joan Mir and briefly Luca Marini on the second day at Buriram was very quick as well, but in 2 Hondas inside the top 10. Does this mean that HRC are perhaps a little bit closer to Yamaha's progress than we think? Because we came out of the Sepang test and we did the Sepang podcast saying, wow, Yamaha almost there. And then you had Pecco Bagnaia saying perhaps Yamaha will be our closest pursuers. It didn't seem so kind of shiny from Buriram, but then Honda also maybe taking a little bit of that limelight.
I think that's absolutely right, Ed. I mean,
2 in a row.
You're on a roll.
It won't happen again.
We'll have to clip this and save it for posterity's sake as the season progresses. But I think Joan Mir was calling Malaysia one of the most promising tests that he's had. Certainly the most promising he's had for Honda, and Buriram just backed that up. Really, it confirmed that it's a lot more manageable, this bike, than its predecessor, the new RC213V, and basically, we know that Mir is a excellent late braker, very, very strong on the brakes, one of the strongest probably in the class when the bike allows him to be. And this bike allows him to ride in the way that he wants. Again, his sprint simulation on the final day was really quite impressive, faster than Fabio Quartararo's sprint simulation. I think it was roughly what Pedro Acosta managed to do on the first day of test over about 10 or 11 laps. And was just under, I think, 0.2 of a second off what Bezzecchi was able to do on average per lap. So, definitely signs of stepping forward there. Again, really, I think a couple of the Honda engineers were having to control themselves and not get too carried away on the final day. And Mir did give a nice little dose of reality in his media debrief when he was saying one big weakness is still the engine. They are the slowest bike, basically, in terms of top speed, I think, on the grid now. And when you factor in the realities of MotoGP racing in 2025, if you're getting dwarfed on the straight, it becomes very, very difficult to overtake. And when you factor all of that in, I think that means that in race situations, it could be quite difficult for the Hondas to kind of cope in battles with other manufacturers. But at least we're seeing progress. I mean, how many years have we gone where Honda had just been laughing stocks, maybe a bit strong, but really just so far off it that you thought, well, what's really the point? At least there are signs now that they're putting things in place. They've got a really good test team now, 3 strong riders. And, I think it's still probably too early to understand exactly what Romano Alessiano has brought in terms of the technical package. I think they were already on the way with that to where they are now. But certainly it seems that, Alessiano has brought a bit more personality and motivation and organization to the role. It's definitely positive. I mean, I don't think we're going to be seeing Mir fighting for top 6. But as you said, if we could be in the top 10 at the first round, that would be amazing.
Yeah, I mean, I think, first of all, I think there's two things. Yamaha, what we're seeing is the Fabio Quartararo really struggling with the front tires. He just didn't have a front tire that he felt comfortable with. That I think distorts where the Yamaha is, and especially where Fabio Quartararo is. I think we'll go to other tracks and the Yamaha will be, much, much better. But it also shows how how much how much the Yamaha relies on a particular front tire that they can use and exploit. In terms of Honda, I think Neil summed it up pretty well. The biggest problem is they've built a fantastic bike which doesn't have enough horsepower, and that they still don't have enough rear grip, and they don't have the acceleration, and they don't have the horsepower. The bike is fast over a single lap. I think we'll see the Honda qualifying a lot better, but in a race, what's going to happen is it'll be in front of a Ducati coming out of the corner, and then it'll be 6 bike lengths behind a Ducati going into the next corner. That is a shame. The contrast between Bezzecchi and Mir is also really, really interesting, because Joan Mir is very much a confidence rider. If he believes in his package, he will really show what he's capable of. I don't think last couple of years he didn't believe in the Honda at all, and he couldn't ride it, didn't want to ride it, and was pretty disappointing. He would just try and crash. If he has the confidence in the front end that he's talking about, then I think he's I think he will really start to show something. But then he's going to end up being frustrated by what happens with the bike, just not having the horsepower. Honda are going to have to bring a new engine with a lot more horsepower. I think the difference with Bezzecchi is that Bezzecchi isn't so much of a confidence rider. He couldn't deal with the rear Michelin, but he has grown in confidence. He's grown in the way that he feels about it, and he will. I think he's going to be a lot more consistent. I think Joan Mir is going to be a lot more up and down, but at least he's going to be up and down much closer to the front.
Dave, if you had to put your money now, where would you say Joan Mir finishes in the first Grand Prix at Buriram?
I'd put him in the top 10. I reckon he's going to be sort of like 8 or 9. I think that's a realistic. Target. There's a bunch of other sort of factors around it which complicate it. But yeah, no. I think the Honda can finish in the top. In the top 10. I don't think the Yamaha. I think the Yamaha are going to struggle to get into the top 5. But if it was at Sepang, Yamaha would finish top 5, and Honda would be pretty close to the top 10. They've made a big step forward.
All right, well, let's round off this podcast with a few rapid fire judgments. We're going to sort of, kind of test our own kind of categories a little bit this year.
That's not what we've been doing the entire pod. Rapid judgments.
Well, I don't know, Neil. I mean, sometimes you go on for like 5 minutes. I wouldn't call that rapid. But if let's try and be a little bit more economical with our judgments on this occasion. But
with the truth.
In previous podcasts in a couple of years, we've had our winners and losers categories, but now we're going to try and expand that a little bit more. We haven't had that much time to prepare for this, so this is going to be very much kind of off the cuff. Just based on what you saw 2 days. Of course, we weren't on the ground for this particular test, but we saw enough of the coverage, and props to some of the after the flag guys, reporting both on the ground and from Barcelona and doing their best to, give some race fans some insight. Dave, I'm going to Neil first. Neil, who was your winner from the Buriram test?
We've already mentioned him, but Marco Bezzecchi, just for the surprise that he gave. I wasn't expecting him to be top 3, and I don't think he was, or Aprilia were. So, Bezzecchi.
I'm going to choose someone different. I mean, Marc Marquez, of course, we already talked about. But I'm going to say Jack Miller, because his progress on the Yamaha has been very bright, and he kept saying how much he believes. You were talking about front-end confidence with Joan Mir and the Honda, Dave, and it seems that Miller already has that, and up to a decent level of speed with the M1. So I'll give the Australian the nod. For you?
I'm going to go with Aprilia for all the reasons that I said about Bezzecchi. Like the bike is good. Savadori was quite pleased with it. They've made the progress in all the right places. Bezzecchi has grown and is going to be competitive. And despite losing Jorge Martin, I think they are looking. I would put them as the number 2 bike behind Ducati. So I think they've come out of it really, really well.
Loser. I'm going to go with Firmino Alguer, who I believe had a little bit more of a dose of realism of MotoGP and being a rookie in the series this year. Even whether it was his starts from the grid or just trying to get, the hang of a different type of circuit. I think, it was a little bit tougher for the Spaniards. And okay, he's only 19 years old and he has a lot to learn, but I think, this showed that it's not going to be quite so easy, even though he is racing a Ducati. Who was your loser, Neil?
Enea Bastianini. It's been a horrible preseason for Enea. It looks like he's a rabbit in the headlights. Looks like he's suffering from shell shock after the switch to KTM. Has found it very difficult to adapt to the RC16. And Dave did a nice little summary on motomatters.com on the final day of testing, where he compared the fastest times from this test with the fastest times from the 2024 round. The biggest improver, Joan Mir, was 0.6 faster than he was last November. Bastianini was the biggest non-improver, the rider that's gone backwards the most. Nearly a full second slower than he was with Ducati in November 2024. That is very concerning, and all evidence through the winter suggests that it's going to be a long year for the beast.
Yeah, I would like to pick someone else, but I can't. It's impossible. Bastianini is just in very, very deep shit for the next 2 years.
Dave, who is your hire?
Who is my hire? I would hire. My hire is Marco Bezzecchi. I would hire him in a heartbeat because he's made a big step forward. I mean, obviously, Marc Marquez is the correct answer, but we can't use that. So I would say I would hire Marco Bezzecchi.
I'm going to keep on my rookie theme, and I'll say Ayagura, because I think he emerged with a great deal of credit again from only his second substantial outing on the Aprilia.
Yeah, and a sign of how good the Aprilia is. It's become it's an easy bike to get up to speed on, even though Agura is clearly a class rider.
What about you, Neil?
Pedro Acosta. We haven't really spoken about him or KTM so much, but he was fourth fastest, which was promising. Also, both he and Binder were pretty happy with the fact that KTM were fast out of the box on the first day of testing, which hasn't really been the case in previous times. It takes them some time to get up to speed, but they were kind of fast from the off. I say Acosta just because I think he is maybe, from what we can see, papering over some of the cracks there. I'm not sure just how well-placed KTM are at the moment. It's always so difficult to read into their preseason. I think Brad Binder said they're about 80% there with their package. They need still to work on 20% of what they'll be riding in Buriram for the first race. But I think Acosta has shown that even when things are not brilliant, he's still capable of putting in pretty professional and competitive lap times. So as he would say, for this, we need to be happy.
Yes, Pedro needs to work a little bit on the interview technique if we are being harsh. The next two categories are kind of harsh. In fact, keep talking, Neil, because who would you fire on the basis of the Buriram test?
David Emmett for suggesting that Jorge Martin getting injured is a good thing for Aprilia, and that they should be thanking their lucky stars that the star rider missed all of preseason testing this year.
Yeah, Dave,
on the grid.
Or in the paddock.
Well, it's I don't want to get myself into hot water before the season's even started. Jeepers! I thought we were going to run this at round one.
Oh, I'm prepared to do. In fact, I'm prepared to risk life and limb by saying that Miguel Oliveira should be fired because he just has not adapted to the Yamaha. He's not comfortable. It's not as bad. It's not Enea Bastianini bad, but it's just not looking good. He's not looking comfortable. He's not looking fast. It's just not fitting in at all.
Poor Miguel. You got to give him some time, surely. I know he's not sort of Miller-esque in terms of adaptation, Dave. But then, if there's anything, Oliveira has shown he has
third manufacturer in a very short time, and he didn't do brilliantly on the Aprilia either. I don't think he adapts to a corner speed bike. I think he'd be better off on a different kind of a machine.
I'm going to contradict myself because I think a firing candidate would have been Raul Fernandez, but he did manage to come back and he did manage to make some laps. So I think, you've got to put him on probation. Can we have a probation category?
But yeah, possibly, yeah. Redemption arc. Perhaps we should have a redemption arc category.
Well, lastly, the kind of the final judgment is retire. And again, this might be a bit harsh. No surprises, listeners, if you want to try and guess who submitted these categories for 2025. But I don't know. I would like to. Can we say Michelin perhaps retire from the Buriram test?
No,
there was lots of rubber flying around.
Yeah. Yeah, but I mean that's just Buriram is brutal because of the heat, because of the layout of the track. You know, it's a lot of very hard acceleration, high speeds. It's utterly brutal. It's not an easy track for circuits at all. So I think that's a bit harsh. I'm going to go with your favourite and mine, Maverick Vinales, because he was being incredibly positive and all the rest of it. And then you look at him on the timesheets and hang on, wait a minute. I thought King of Winter testing is down
It was 0.7 off. That's hardly like a country mile.
Yeah.
A 6 day on a bike. It's not, it's not exactly crisis mode, is it, Dave?
Let's see.
Are you trying to ensure that no one in the paddock ever wants to talk to us again with these new categories, by the way? Fire and retire.
Loser. That's 3 out of 5.
Yeah, make them all wander around with a great big L on their head. Yeah, no, yes, that's obviously what I'm trying to do.
Well, listen, on our Discord channel for patrons, we like to interact. We like to ask for ideas. We like to ask what people want to hear. So having listened to this and you want to join us and contribute, then let us know, what kind of categories you would like to see for 2025. We want to expand beyond the winners and losers and get a little bit more creative, especially for our Sunday evening Paddock Pass podcast. So let us know. Neil, do you have a retiree?
I don't, Ed. No, I think it's maybe slightly premature to suggest someone should retire after 2 days of preseason testing.
Where's the fun in that?
But then,
I mean, what you're going to be wanting facts and all that sort of thing next, aren't you?
All right, Marc Marquez then for the first round of the year, just to give the others a chance. How about that?
Yeah, that's a good one.
God, pragmatism has been the theme, hasn't it? I'm not used to this new Neil Morrison for 2025. It's a bit disturbing. We are on the edge of a new season, it would seem, turning over a new leaf. But there we go. Well, listen, that's it, gentlemen. Dave, enjoy your holiday in Portugal.
Thank you.
Try to stay away from motorsport venues. Don't go anywhere near it.
I did. We did actually. I'd actually programmed in the route yesterday to go past Portimao, but then at the last minute changed it. So I didn't. And I'm trying to stay away. Do
you play like bike noises in the background when you're at home in the flat cooking dinner, just to make up for the fact that
whenever I close my eyes to go to sleep, all I hear is bike noises?
And Neil, last weekend of freedom, as we said, just before the whole schedule cranks into motion, and then we will be looking more at flight times and travel arrangements. So enjoy yourself, get on that bicycle, especially with the sunshine in Barcelona at the moment. It is quite lovely. Spring is coming, so happy days. Other than that, thanks again to Renthal Street and to Pole Position Travel. Don't forget, if you are considering a trip to the Buriram International Circuit for the first Grand Prix, use TIE25Q to get 10% off travel. And I think I had a message actually for some colleagues who were trying to find hotels around Buriram to be able to come to the Grand Prix, and they were finding zilch. So the fact that Pole Position Travel have some options, then take profit, come to the race, enjoy what will be, well, in my opinion, an unpredictable first Grand Prix. But then, according to the rest of the lads on the podcast, Marc Marquez is already lifting the trophy. So let's wait and see. We'll have our preview for the season next week. And of course, don't forget to check out our channel as well as our patreon.com channel, because Steve and Gordo will be loading up with content for the first round of the World Superbike season. Thank you for listening, everybody. Bye-bye.